हेलो गाइस, वेलकम बैक टू लॉस्टॉर्मिंग प्लेटफॉर्म। मैं हूं शालिनी और आज के इस वीडियो में हम डील करेंगे कम्युनिकेशन एंड रेवोकेशन ऑफ प्रपोजल एंड एक्सेप्टेंस से। अगर इसके पहले की वीडियो को आपने नहीं देखा है देन उसका लिंक ऊपर कार्ड पे और नीचे डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स में आ जाएगा। प्लीज़ वॉच दैट बिफोर वॉचिंग दिस वीडियो। लेट्स गेट स्टार्टेड। Now, communication of proposal and acceptance when complete. So, Section 5 of the Indian Contract Act says that the communication of proposal is complete when it comes to the knowledge of the person to whom it is made. तो एक बार हम जिसको प्रपोजल दे रहे हैं उसको ये बात कम्युनिकेट हो गई, द कम्युनिकेशन ऑफ प्रपोजल इज complete. However, the communication of acceptance is complete as against the proposer when it is put in course of transmission to him so as to be out of the power of the acceptor, whereas as against the acceptor when it comes to the knowledge of the proposer. So acceptance के केस में जो टाइमिंग है ऑफ कंप्लीशन ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन ऑफ एक्सेप्टेंस वो डिफरेंट है विद रिस्पेक्ट टू प्रपोजर एंड विद रिस्पेक्ट टू एक्सेप्टर। प्रपोजर के केस में जैसे ही एक्सेप्टर ने ऑफर को एक्सेप्ट किया और उसने उसे पोस्ट कर दिया so as to be out of his power, that acceptance is complete as against the proposer and now the proposer is bound by the contract. However, अभी तक acceptor bound नहीं हुआ है। acceptor कब bound होगा? जब वो जो उसने acceptance भेजी है that is received by the proposer. So once the proposal is received by the proposer, at that time the acceptor becomes bound by the contract. Let's understand this with the help of an example. A proposes by letter to sell a house to B at a certain price. So यहाँ पे A is the offerer and B is the acceptor. So as soon as A offers B and he receives that letter, the communication of proposal is complete, right? Whereas when B accepts A's proposal by letter sent by post, the communication of acceptance is complete as against A, that is the offerer, when the letter is posted. But as against the acceptor, the acceptance will be complete when the letter is received by the offerer, that is A. ठीक है? After this, let's understand communication of revocation. So communication of revocation is complete as against the person who makes it when it is put in the course of transmission to the person to whom it is made, so as to be out of the power of the person who makes it, and as against the person to whom it is made when it comes to his knowledge. So, communication of revocation का scenario is completely opposite to communication of acceptance. क्योंकि communication of revocation के केस में जो पार्टी contract को revoke कर रही है, that party is bound by the revocation as soon as the revocation is put in course of transmission. And the party against whom the revocation is made is bound when it comes to his knowledge. Let's see an example. A revokes his proposal by telegram. So यहाँ पे A revoke कर रहा है. So the revocation is complete as against A when the telegram is dispatched. It is complete as against B when B receives it. Okay. दूसरा एग्जाम्पल देखते हैं. B revokes his acceptance by telegram. So यहाँ पे क्योंकि B revoke कर रहा है, B's revocation is complete as against B when telegram is dispatched and as against the party जिसको वो revocation दे रहा है, that is A, when the revocation reaches A. Okay. Now let's understand when we can revoke a proposal and when at what time we can revoke the acceptance of the proposal. So a proposal may be revoked at any time before the communication of its acceptance is complete as against the proposer but not afterwards. So proposal को revoke किया जा सकता है इसके पहले कि acceptance is communicated to the proposer. And communication of acceptance कब complete हो जाता है as against the proposer? As soon as the acceptance is put in course of transmission by the acceptor to be out of the power of acceptor. At that time, the acceptance is complete as against the proposer and proposer bound हो जाता है. तो इससे पहले कि acceptor अपना acceptance को post करे, proposal need to be revoked by the offerer, but not afterwards. उसके बाद an acceptance may be revoked at any time before the communication of acceptance is complete as against the acceptor but not afterwards. So acceptance कब complete होता है as against the acceptor? When the acceptance is received by the offerer or the proposer. तो इससे पहले कि acceptance पहुंचे proposer के पास and the acceptor becomes bound, उसके पहले with a faster medium acceptor needs to revoke his acceptance. Alright? Now एक example देखते हैं. A proposes by letter sent by post to sell his house to B. B accepts the proposal by letter sent by post. Now A कब रिवोक कर सकता है अपना प्रपोजल? एट एनी टाइम बिफोर और एट द मोमेंट व्हेन B post his letter of acceptance but not afterwards, and B may revoke his acceptance at any time before or at the moment when the letter communicating it reaches A, but before it reaches A but not afterwards. Okay, now let's understand when contract is concluded. If we talk about postal communication, does the contract arises when the acceptance is posted, or the contract is formed when it is received, when the acceptance is received by the offerer? So in case of Adam versus Linsel, the defendant offered to sell quantity of wool to the plaintiff on September 2nd, and this offer was received by the plaintiff on September 5th. So offer was communicated on September 5th, and on that evening itself the plaintiff wrote an answer agreeing to accept the wool, and this letter of acceptance was received by the defendant on September 9. Alright? After this, the defendant waited for the acceptance up till September 8, and not having received the acceptance letter till September 8, they sold the wool to other party on that date, and they were sued for breach of contract by the plaintiff. ठीक है, तो इसमें 4 important date है. Firstly, the offer was made on 2nd September. The offer was communicated to the acceptor on September 5th. The offer was accepted by the plaintiff on the very same date, and it reached the defendant on September 9th. However, उन लोगों ने पहले ही wool को dispatch कर दिया, and they sold it to other parties on September 8 itself. Now, the defendant contended that till the plaintiff's answer was actually received, there could be no binding contract, and therefore they were free to sell the wool on 8th September. So the court explained in this case कि अगर ऐसे ही चलता रहा, then no contract would be completed by post ever. क्योंकि if the defendant will not be bound by their offer when the offer is accepted by the plaintiff till the answer was received by them, then उस हिसाब से plaintiff will also not be bound till they have received a notification from the defendant that they had received their answer, and this will go on endlessly between the offerer and the acceptor कि offer receive हो गया, acceptance receive हो गया, and they'll have to notify it with another post, right? And therefore the court said that the result is that a complete contract arises on the date when the letter of acceptance is posted in due course, and not when the letter of acceptance is received by the proposer. So on the day the acceptor posts the letter of acceptance, the contract is concluded when we talk about postal communication. Now let's see if there's any difference between English law and Indian law when it comes to the date of communication of acceptance. So the only difference that the section makes is in the position of the acceptor. In England, when letter of acceptance is posted, both the offerer and the acceptor becomes irrevocably bound. But in India, the acceptor does not become bound by merely posting his acceptance. Acceptor कब bound होता है? When the acceptance is received by the proposer. When the letter of acceptance is posted, उस time पे सिर्फ proposer is bound by the contract and not the acceptor. Acceptor later date पे bound होता है when the acceptance is received by the proposer. So the gap of time between the posting and delivery of acceptance, जो वो दोनों date के बीच जो time है, that gap can be utilized by the acceptor for revoking his acceptance by a speedier communication, which will overtake the acceptance. इसीलिए revocation is to be made by a speedier post so that it reaches the proposer before acceptance reaches the proposer, अगर acceptor को अपने communication को revoke करना है. Alright? So the rule is that after an acceptance is posted and before it comes to the knowledge of the offerer, only one party, that is the offerer, is bound by the contract and not the acceptor. Okay? Now let's try and understand कि the postal communication का जो rule है, whether it applies also to direct and instantaneous communication, या फिर is there any other rule, and when is contract concluded in case of instantaneous communication. So where the parties are in each other's presence, or though they are separated in space, they are in direct communication, let's say by telephone or any other instantaneous means of communication, then in that scenario, no contract will arise until the offerer receives the notification of acceptance. Now, this was discussed in Entorres Limited versus Mile Far East Corporation. Now, the fact of the case is that an offer was made from London by Telex to a party in Holland, and it was duly accepted through Telex. So the question in this case was whether the contract was made in Holland or in England. सो अगर हम पोस्टल कम्युनिकेशन के रूल को अप्लाई करें देन द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट वुड बी कंक्लूडेड इन हॉलैंड क्योंकि वहीं से एक्सेप्टेंस वाज पोस्टेड बट बिकॉज दिस इज इंस्टेंटेनियस कम्युनिकेशन द कोर्ट ऑफ अपील हेल्ड दैट द रूल फॉर इंस्टेंटेनियस कम्युनिकेशन इज डिफरेंट फ्रॉम द रूल ऑफ post. And in the instantaneous case of communication, the contract is only complete when the acceptance is received by the offerer and the contract is made at the place where the acceptance is received. And therefore, in this case, the acceptance will be received at London because through telex, the acceptance will be heard in London. And therefore, the communication of acceptance is complete in London and the contract is concluded in London. Now, this principle of Entour's case was applied by the Supreme Court in Bhagwan Das Govardhan Das Kedia versus Girdhari Lal Purushottam Das and Company. In this case, again, the plaintiff made an offer through a telephonic conversation from Ahmedabad to the defendant at Khamgaon to purchase certain goods, and the defendant accepted the offer. And the question was whether the conversation resulted in contract at Khamgaon or at Ahmedabad. Now again, because this is instantaneous communication, the court held that the contract was made at Ahmedabad where the acceptance was communicated. In case of instantaneous communication such as telephone, the acceptance is deemed to be complete when the offerer receives or hears the acceptance at his end. Alright? As opposed to postal communication where the contract is concluded where the acceptance is posted. ठीक है? After this, let's understand how revocation is made. So, as per Section 6 of the Indian Contract Act, a proposal is revoked either by the communication of notice of revocation by the proposer to the other party or secondly by lapse of time prescribed in such proposal. और अगर कोई time prescribed नहीं किया है, then on lapse of reasonable time without communication of acceptance. Thirdly, the proposal is revoked by failure of acceptor to fulfill a condition precedent to acceptance. So if there was any condition that had to be fulfilled before acceptance and अगर acceptor ने वो condition fulfill नहीं किए, then the proposal is revoked. And fourthly, by the death or insanity of the proposer. If the fact of the death or insanity comes to the knowledge of the acceptor before acceptance, then in that case the proposal is revoked. लेकिन अगर उसे ये बात knowledge में नहीं आती, उसने accept कर लिया, then it will be a valid acceptance. Alright, with this we have concluded communication of proposal and acceptance as well as revocation of proposal and acceptance. अगर आपको ये वीडियो पसंद आया then please like, share, subscribe and comment your suggestions in the comment box below. मिलते हैं अगले वीडियो में. Bye bye.